Or if Ira posts an article like this, FSU defensive tackle breakdown, I go, oh, well, yes. Don't mind if I do. Let's click on it. Hello, Ira. How the hell are you, brother?
I'm good, Jeff. How you doing, man?
Better, because we have conversations like this. It's great. Isn't it fun? It's fun for you to do one of these, right?
Well, yeah, and this was a good exercise for me because, we look back at last season and, obviously the interior of the defensive line was supposed to be a strength in 2022. We all thought it would be. You have Fabian Levitt, Robert Cooper coming back, and you had some guys that had played in 2021 and thought maybe they could, take a step forward. And then you get into the season and you see Wake Forest and Louisville running it up the gut, and it hurts your heart a little bit.
It does.
And but when you look back at it, you realize, okay, well, Fabian Levitt got knocked out in the season opener or the second game of the season, and he was out for a long time. And then Robert Cooper, look at Robert Cooper's numbers. We always thought, we assumed he was injured for all season, but when you look at the numbers at the end of the year, it's just stark. He finished the year with 19 tackles. That was his fourth year as a starter. A year before, he had 40 tackles, and he had 19 tackles. So obviously, he wasn't healthy. Fabian Levitt wasn't available for half the season. And then those two guys right behind them that you thought might take a jump, Jared Jackson and Malcolm Ray, really didn't do that. So, on the one hand, you say, okay, we were really wrong about our evaluation about that position going into last year, but also it was kind of the worst case scenario where everything kind of went wrong for that group.
Yeah, I believe a healthy Fabian Levitt and a healthy Robert Cooper, would have wreaked havoc. Right. At least in the times they were on the field together, I think they would have. But neither
we saw it in the LSU game.
That's right. Yeah, and then neither were healthy the rest of the year. I mean, that's the bottom line. They weren't. And you know what? To varying extent, Malcolm Ray wasn't healthy. He was playing hurt for much of the year too, and I think that certainly directly impacted his ability to take a step forward. Luckily, and I know you know this in the article, you do have guys that you feel good about, like Joshua Farmer's really coming on. That's a reason to be excited. I like Daniel Lyons an awful lot. I think he's going to be good, and we've gone through this and talked about what's potentially coming down the pike here. Well, you add Darrell Jackson, who can play. You've seen him; he can play at a high level. Braden Fisk coming in is a big deal. He's a big, huge body, and was one of the better transfers in the portal. So again, and Tafasi's a kid I really like. I've already seen him. I like him a lot. I think he's going to emerge as a good football player. So there's real hope here that can be a much more impactful group next season.
Without question. And the thing is, if you obviously, if you have a calamity of injuries like they did last year, then it could be, it could turn out completely different than we expect. But you go into a year where you feel really good about your top 5 defensive tackles, and I feel good about those top 5 defensive tackles. Well, now you're in really good shape, and then you've got in some guys, as you mentioned. Daniel Lyons wouldn't even be in that group, but I think he's got a ton of potential. Mm-hmm. And then even Bishop Thomas and Tafasi and Tavius Woody, who came in as an offensive lineman, moving to defensive tackle, and they signed a freshman as well. So yeah, there's just Odell Higgins has a really good group to work with, and again, a lot of times we evaluate coaches based on how their positions produce. I think Odell Higgins is going to look a lot better in 2023 as a position coach than he might have at times in 2022.
Yeah, when I think about what they have, when you go back and look again, I brought Jackson up for a reason. When you watch Miami, they're not any good, but he was. And you're talking about 6'5", 315 pounds. They've got some horses in the middle now that I think are going to be very, very interesting. They're all on the defensive line. Florida State's bigger and deeper. So those guys, when they're in, can go balls to the wall, come out, and they'll be, the rotation sees the floor raised quite a bit. So that next group that comes in will be even just as effective or close to it because they can go all out and know that they can get a breather. So you're going to see all these guys, I think, having to play fewer reps, but with a higher level of intensity on each of those reps.
Yeah, I agree. And also, don't you think it's going to give us a more true evaluation maybe of what we've seen at linebacker? Because it's easy for, us to say, okay, well, those linebackers got washed out on that play or they were not very effective in that game. But it's a hell of a challenge when you're playing inside linebacker and you don't have much happening at defensive tackle.
Sure.
So now I think, you see Kalen DeLoach is a guy who needs to be able to run free. And if you've got very good defensive tackles, now all of a sudden Kalen DeLoach looks like a much better player. Tatum Bethune, I like it a lot as a linebacker, but I thought there were times last season where he ended up guessing because he couldn't figure out where to be because he couldn't. The offensive line was just on him. And so now I think you're going to see those guys have a better opportunity to make plays. And if they upgrade that position, through the portal, there's still a possibility they may do that. But I think it helps those guys immensely. And we thought, again, going back to last season, what we thought going into this year, and this was kind of this whole exercise position by position, is, okay, what did we think coming into the year? What did we actually see? And now what's going to happen in the future? I thought they were going to be really strong up the middle because they'd improved at linebacker and because of what they had as those starting defensive tackles. But not having those guys healthy up front really changed everything and really changed the complexion of the whole defense.
Well, and it's a reason to be excited. We talk often about how excited everybody is because of the steps forward the program has taken, but I think it's realistic now to expect that the linebackers will play better because they're not covered. They're not covered up. They have opportunities because the defensive line in front of them is covering up the offensive line and to really run. And I also think that we're seeing an upgrade and some talent there, better depth. It'll be interesting to see how quickly some of the freshmen can play or even redshirt guys, how quickly they can play.